Picture your mother being told that you are either dead or with your arm blown off, kidnapped by a terrorist organization and being held hostage in Gaza where there is a war. Those are the only two options. So that's how we are.
For Jonathan Pollard and Rachel Goldberg, the last week has been a hell they cannot escape. The Chicago couple's 23-year-old son, Hirsch, is one of the roughly 200 people terrorist group Hamas says it's taken hostage and could include up to 13 Americans who remain missing.
How are you able to, and I ask this less as a journalist but more as a parent, how are you just able to get up every day and face each day?
Getting up is not as hard when you don't go to sleep. I try to go through the many texts or emails that we're getting, and I say, I'm going to go do my cry now. And I go into my room and I do my, primal mother, and then I wipe my face and I say, and now I have to go fight.
Fighting while painstakingly waiting as the war between Israel and Hamas intensifies. And an IDF ground invasion of Gaza seems imminent. For Israel, a growing urgency to free hostages taken by Hamas. While in Gaza, a humanitarian crisis worsening. Israel has mobilized around 360,000 reservists, vowing to take out Hamas after its attack in Israel last week. The death toll from that attack now rising to more than 1,400, including 30 Americans.
We will strike Hamas from the top, through its institutions, all the way down to the individuals that conducted the butchery of our babies.
Tension in the surrounding areas continues to grow. Today, Hezbollah, an Iranian-backed terrorist group based in Lebanon, also launching missiles at northern Israeli towns and military posts, stoking fears that a second front could emerge.
If you have Hamas and you have Hezbollah in the north and you have Iran doing something as well, that is potentially a very serious situation.
As the U.S. moves another military ship to the eastern Mediterranean near Israel, top National Security Council spokesman John Kirby sending a clear message to Lebanon and other countries in the region.
Don't get involved. Do not try to widen or deepen this conflict any more than it already has.
Tonight, 2,000 U.S. troops prepare to be on alert for possible deployment to the Middle East. As Israel continues its counteroffensive in Gaza, civilians are caught in the crosshairs. In the last week, more than 2,700 Palestinians have been killed and nearly 10,000 wounded. Hospitals already overwhelmed, now on the brink of collapse. This ice cream truck turned into a makeshift morgue.
They have been bombing for 12 hours, from 9 to 9. With no stop.
The Israeli government urging civilians, more than 1 million people, to evacuate northern Gaza. The questions remain how and to where. My colleague Matt Rivers is in Egypt.
It's important to remember that if you want to leave Gaza by land, there's only 2 ways to do so. One is by crossing into Israel. Of course, that's not happening. And the other, crossing into Egypt. Now, overnight, a source in Egypt's security forces telling us a deal had been reached to temporarily open that border. That has not happened.
Egyptians are not incentivized to take these refugees because they don't know who's Hamas and who's just a Palestinian. So very, very difficult because the country has to agree to let them out through the gate. Then the Israelis have to agree to stop bombing.
Hamas reportedly telling residents to remain in place and even blocking some from moving south, according to Secretary Blinken. The situation dire as electricity and food supplies remain cut off, water down to a trickle and in only one small part of the Gaza Strip. Among those trapped in Gaza, upwards of 600 Palestinian Americans like Maha Barakat. ABC's Ian Pannell spoke on the phone with the aid worker from New Jersey. She managed to flee south, but fears what may happen next and says she's now staying with 48 people in one house.
You had to leave your home?
I did. I left with my nephew's relatives. My brother could not leave because I have an older sister who she has a disability and she cannot move. So she had to stay with her.
You say you've been contacted by the State Department twice. What have they told you?
They said that they're trying to evacuate us and that it's not safe. We have hundreds of people gathering at the crossing. With no direction. No one is telling us anything.
Amid the chaos unfolding in Gaza, coordinating the safe return of hostages is a top priority for both Israel and America. Tonight, for the first time, we're hearing from one of them, Hamas releasing this video of 21-year-old Israeli Maya Shim, her family giving us permission to show these images. Taken from that dance party, we can see her arm wrapped in gauze. I just ask that you'll bring me home as soon as possible to my family, she says. To my parents, to my brothers. Please get us out of here as soon as possible.
Israelis are quite aggressive when they go in to hostage situations. In some ways, U.S. in extremis hostage rescue is much more risk averse than it is in Israel, but Israel also has far more experience than the U.S. does.
Israel has as part of its ethos the belief that in order to have a people's army, we have the principle that we don't leave anyone behind.
Gershon Baskin has negotiated with Hamas before and has been speaking to members of Hamas over the last week. More than a decade ago, he led efforts to bring IDF soldier Gilad Shalit home after 5 years in captivity. Shalit was exchanged for more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. One of the prisoners reportedly released in this Shalit deal, the alleged mastermind behind last week's attack.
Yahya Sinwar, the leader, was in Israeli prison for 22 years. Israel saved him. He had brain cancer when he was in prison, and he was healed in an Israeli hospital, and he's the leader of Hamas today.
He says this situation is unprecedented, due in part to the sheer number being held, as well as Hamas's dense network of tunnels in the north.
We don't have 5 years and 4 months to wait to free these hostages. There needs to be extreme pressure put on Hamas. Once the ground operation begins, there are no chances for negotiations.
As for the 13 Americans thought to be held hostage by Hamas, Baskin says it's an especially difficult situation.
It does bring up the question of whether or not the United States and these other countries have a bigger role in using their leverage. Some of them met with Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday. It was the first time they met with him. President Biden spent an hour and a half on the phone with representatives of some of the hostages.
One of those families, Hirsch's parents, Jonathan Poland and Rachel Goldberg.
President Biden got on the call, and for 90 minutes he stayed and he listened to us and he cried with us, and he understands loss, so he said the right things.
He was celebrating his birthday with friends at the music festival in southern Israel when his parents say he was captured by Hamas. This picture, their last proof of life and a beacon of hope. He's seen here in this bomb shelter near the music festival. The family learned through friends who survived. Hamas terrorists had thrown hand grenades into the shelter.
Most of the people in there died. They came in and they said to 3 young men who they could tell were still alive, stand up, and Hirsch was one of the 3.
The police eventually located Hirsch's phone in Gaza. Now Rachel and Jonathan's hope lie with the government and their faith.
And what action would you like to see?
We need not only the U.S. administration, but others screaming to the world that there are hostages in dire need of medical care. It needs to get to them.
Where does your calm, kind, clarity of purpose come from?
We have too much to do. And I remember years ago, someone was going through a bad period in their life, and she told me, when you're going through hell, keep walking.
Winston Churchill.
We're keeping our faith, even when it's hard, even when it's dark.